There are love stories that don't end with a breakup, but with silence. In Seattle, the city of unending rain, a woman once believed that love could redeem everything, until she realized that sometimes love itself is the deepest wound. And he, a man who once had it all, a career, fame, and a family, only understood what truly mattered when he lost them all, and with them, his sense of pride. A phone call in the night, a drop of blood, 2 tiny lives. That's where this story begins, not with happiness, but with redemption. This is the journey of Ethan and Rachel, 2 people who once lost each other in the rain of Seattle and learned to love again in the light after the storm. A story not just about love, but about how people find themselves again when it seems far too late. Seattle, March. The rain fell, as it always did in this city, not loud enough to soak the pines and blur the streetlights reflecting on the pavement. In a small courtroom on 2nd Avenue, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and damp paper. The clock on the wall read 9:42 a.m. Everything seemed still, except for the faint scratch of a pen across paper, the only sound in the room. Ethan Lewis sat there, pale grey eyes fixed on the space ahead. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, his tie neatly knotted, every detail about him precise to the point of cruelty. Across the table sat Rachel, the woman he once vowed to walk with for life, her fingers trembling slightly. Each time she signed, she paused, trying to steady her hand, to keep her handwriting from falling apart. The pen moved slowly, making a dry, cutting sound like slicing through something invisible. The lawyer between them spoke in an even tone. "This is the last page, Mrs. Lewis. Once you sign, everything will be finalized." She nodded. "Thank you." Her voice was hoarse, dry, as though the last bit of warmth had just left her chest. Ethan lowered his gaze. He picked up the silver pen, her gift to him when he launched his first company, and signed swiftly, decisively, as if tearing apart a thread that once bound his heart. "All done," the lawyer said, collecting the papers, his voice devoid of emotion. Rachel drew in a breath, placed her hand on the table's edge, and stood. The scrape of her chair echoed sharply in the silence. She slung her bag over her shoulder, eyes fixed on the door, never looking back. Ethan wanted to speak anything, but his throat closed up. All he could hear was his own breathing, soft and hollow. "Rachel," he blurted out. She stopped. Without turning, she said quietly, "I hope you find what you're looking for." The door opened, letting in the pale daylight. The rain was still falling. She walked away, her petite figure dissolving into the crowd in the courthouse hallway. The door shut behind her, leaving Ethan in a room filled with the cold smell of rain and the clock ticking. The lawyer said, "Mr. Lewis, the paperwork will be filed today. The final copy will arrive at your office in a few weeks." "Yes," Ethan replied curtly, his voice rough. He gathered the files and stood. His leather shoes made faint, heavy sounds as he approached the door. The courthouse hallway was crowded. Other couples waited their turn, their eyes equally weary, but Ethan saw no one. The world before him blurred with mist, and the one truth he didn't want to face: emptiness. He descended the stone steps. Outside, the rain was falling harder. Umbrellas bloomed like hurried shields for open wounds. Ethan had no umbrella. He walked straight into the rain, letting the water soak through his hair, shirt, and skin. Only one thought echoed in his mind: I did the right thing. For 6 months, Ethan had convinced himself that Rachel no longer fit into his life. She held him back, distracted him from the booming success of his company, Nova Edge Incorporated. Marcus Paulson, his closest friend and business partner, had told him, "If you want to go far, you have to be decisive. You can't build an empire while clinging to feelings." And Ethan believed him. He opened his car door, sat behind the wheel, and glanced at the courthouse in the rearview mirror. She was gone. Maybe she had turned down another street or taken a cab back to her small apartment. No more our home. No more us. He placed the divorce papers on the passenger seat, his neat signature staring back at him, cold, final, and a sudden ache shot through his chest. He pressed the ignition. The engine roared softly, blending with the sound of rain. On the drive home, the streetlights gleamed through the mist, streaks of gold shimmering on wet asphalt. Seattle was drenched in vapor, and Ethan drowned in something more profound, something breaking inside him. At the intersection, his phone rang. The screen lit up. Marcus Paulson. He answered. Ethan? It's done? Yeah. It's done. Good. Meet me at the Harbour Light. Champagne's waiting. Ethan let out a faint laugh. You sound excited. You're free, man. No more strings. From now on, it's just the business. Ethan was silent. 1 second. 2. Yeah, just the business. He hung up and leaned back in his seat. Outside, the rain fell steadily. Seattle breathed on. And Ethan Lewis, a man who seemed to have everything, realized he had never felt so alone. That evening, the Harbour Light was ablaze with light. Wine glasses clinked, jazz played, and laughter from business elites filled the air. Ethan walked in, his coat still damp, rain clinging to his hair. Marcus stood, arms wide. The free man himself. Ethan sat, forcing a smile. Marcus poured the wine. Their glasses chimed. To new beginnings, Ethan replied softly. Thanks. Marcus leaned in. Trust me, give it a few months and you'll feel lighter. Rachel's great, but she's not on your level. She never understood the pressure you're under. Ethan stared into his glass. The red liquid shimmered under the yellow light, gleaming like blood. He murmured, almost to himself, She used to understand me better than anyone. Marcus paused, then chuckled. So what? Feelings don't fund a billion-dollar company. Be realistic. Ethan drained his glass. The burn slid down his throat. All night, Marcus talked about contracts, investments, and the future. Ethan heard only the rain hitting the windows, the wind howling over the bay, and Rachel's trembling hand signing her name that morning. When he left the restaurant, it was late. The city was veiled in damp mist. At the parking lot, he checked his phone, but there were no messages, nothing from her. The automatic lights flicked on at his apartment on the 27th floor. Everything looked perfect, cold and empty. He tossed his keys on the table, shrugged off his coat, and stood before the wide window. Below, the city shimmered under the rain. Roads glistened like glowing threads. He turned on a dim kitchen light, reached for an old bottle of whiskey, and poured himself a glass. The smell was sharp. He remembered the nights when Rachel would hum softly in the kitchen, the scent of hot chocolate filling their home. She used to say, "Seattle isn't sad when it rains, it just needs someone to sit with you." He hadn't listened. He was always busy, always in meetings, always with an excuse not to come home. And now, there was no one left to come home to. He passed the photo frame on the shelf, the one from Pike Place Market, her hair blown by the wind, his smile wide. He picked it up, his fingers brushing the glass. The frame slipped, shattered on the floor. Ethan crouched, picking up the pieces. Her face, cracked across the broken glass, stared back at him. He let out a hoarse laugh. "Freedom, huh?" Thunder rumbled outside. The rain grew heavier, pounding the city. He stood by the window again, staring into the grey blur. Rachel was starting over somewhere in this city, maybe in a small apartment, maybe at her favorite cafe. He wondered if she was crying, or if she felt the same strange relief he had once imagined. Part of him wanted to call to hear her voice and ask, "Are you okay?" But his hand froze midair. He'd made his choice. He couldn't afford weakness. He set the phone down, showered, and tried to wash it all away, but the hot water couldn't warm the cold in his chest. That night, lying in bed beneath the white ceiling, he listened to the rain's steady rhythm, a lullaby for sorrow. He thought of their years together, the first trip to San Diego, their first Christmas in that tiny apartment, Rachel's laughter when he clumsily tried to cook. All of it is now just memories. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I hope you find what you're looking for." Had he found his? No. He had just lost the very thing he'd been searching for all along. Outside, the rain kept falling, and in that cold, silent apartment, a wealthy man sat still, listening to the sound of his heart breaking, unaware that, somewhere else in Seattle, a tiny life was beginning to form, carrying half of his blood. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building, grey, damp in the way Seattle seemed to make everything. Outside, Westlake Avenue glowed with streetlights. Streetcars screeched over the tracks, And each time one passed, the room trembled slightly, like the city exhaling. Rachel opened the door. The heavy wooden frame groaned. Inside was a space just big enough for one person. A single bed, a small table by the window, a tiny electric stove, and a humming mini-fridge. She stood in the middle, looking around. Everything was tidy, cold, unfamiliar. The previous tenant had left a potted plant on the windowsill, a fragile vine, thin-stemmed, with brown-edged leaves curling at the tips. She touched it gently, murmuring to herself, "At least someone once lived here." She set the box on the floor. Inside were a few books, a couple of framed photos, a chipped coffee pot, and a cream-colored sweater, Ethan's birthday gift from their first year of marriage. She had thought about throwing it away, but folded it carefully and placed it on the shelf. There wasn't much in the room, but at least it was hers. No more silent dinners, no more midnight phone calls, no more distant eyes when he came home late without a word. Rachel sank to the floor, her back against the wall. The cold surface numbed her skin. Her head spun, perhaps from hunger, perhaps from exhaustion. She hadn't eaten anything since a cup of coffee that morning. From the next apartment came laughter. A young couple talking, their voices slipping through thin walls, mixed with the clatter of a pan on the stove. "Did you see that?" The cat's on the table again. The woman's laughter rang bright, spilling softly into Rachel's room. Her lips tightened. That sound ached in her chest. Her old apartment had once been filled with those same sounds, clinking dishes, laughter, and soft evening music. Now, only silence. She stood, drew the curtains. Outside, the rain was falling fine, steady, endless. Seattle never stopped raining. Streetlights reflected off the window, spreading gold across the walls. Everything looked blurred, like a dream refusing to fade. She turned on the TV, a cooking show. The host was making pasta, smiling as he stirred a sauce pot. She turned up the volume to drown out the laughter next door. Time passed like the rain outside, slow, steady, without event. She went to work on time, came home on time, ate little, and slept less. She wrote in her journal at night, a habit she had once given up. The first page read only a few simple lines. March 14th. Everything is quiet. Maybe that's a good thing. She smiled faintly when she reread it. Quiet sometimes, it was louder than any noise. Then one morning, as she got out of bed, nausea hit her. Not much, just a wave, but strong enough to make her sit back down. She thought it was something she had eaten. But when it came back the next day, and the day after, worry began to take root. Rachel wasn't one to imagine things. She was practical. She blamed stress, the move, anything but the one reason her heart whispered to her. A week later, even coffee, the one thing she loved, made her sick. She stared at the steaming cup, trembling. And for the first time, a small, trembling voice inside her said, "No, it can't be." She decided not to think about it. She was busy. She had rent, bills, and a life to hold together. But her body refused to listen. The dizziness came without warning. Her breasts began to ache, and every morning she woke up feeling both fragile and light. That night, sitting by the window with her journal, she wrote, March 24th, "Something is changing. I feel. Something inside me is alive." Her hand drifted to her stomach. She took a deep breath. No, impossible. Ethan was gone. It was over. She shook her head, turned up the TV, trying to drown the thought. Outside, the wind moaned through the window frame, carrying the chill off Elliott Bay. She curled under the blanket, eyes closed, sleep refusing to come. She heard the rain against the glass through the haze, steady as a heartbeat. 2 beats, 2 heartbeats, soft and secret. Rachel tried to deny it in the following weeks, but the body had its own language. One morning, while brushing her hair, she looked in the mirror and saw someone else. Her face was pale, with shadows under her eyes, but her gaze had changed, softer, frightened, and luminous. She placed a hand over her stomach, warm, tender, slightly full, no longer her imagination. She sat on the edge of the sink. The tap kept running, a thin stream of cold water. Steam fogged the mirror. Through the mist, her reflection blurred and a tear slipped down her chin. No, no, it can't be, she whispered. Her hands shook as she opened the cabinet, searching for something she hadn't touched in months, a pregnancy test. The result appeared 2 pink lines, precise as fate. She didn't scream, didn't faint. She just sat there, the world's weight pressing into that small, cramped room. Then, slowly, she began to cry, not from fear, not from joy, but because she didn't know what to do next. She sat on the cold floor, arms around her knees, letting the tears fall. Outside, the rain began again. A knock startled her. It was silver-haired Mrs. Hale, the widow from downstairs, holding a bag of apples. "Heard you just moved in," she said kindly. "I baked an apple pie, thought you might like a slice." Rachel forced a smile, murmured thanks. "You look tired," Mrs. Hale said softly. "Eat well, dear. Seattle's chill can be cruel." "I'll try," Rachel replied. When the door closed, the scent of warm apples lingered in the air, sweet and comforting. Rachel felt something stir inside her for the first time in days. A will to live, not for herself, for someone else, someone growing within her. In the following days, she began to care again, to eat, rest, and read about pregnancy. She searched online. Week 6, the heartbeat begins. Her fingers touched her chest, imagining that tiny rhythm. A fragile pulse, alive inside her. She thought about writing to Ethan. Just one line. "I'm pregnant." But the pen stopped mid-air. What for? He had chosen to leave. He said she held him back, kept him from moving forward. Now he was free, celebrating, living the life he wanted. She wouldn't be the reason he came back. She wouldn't be anyone's pity. So she folded the page and burned it in the ashtray. The small flame flickered, then died. April came. The rain hadn't stopped. Rachel quit her office job and switched to part-time, answering calls from home. Each day she sat before her computer, her voice calm, steady. "Thank you for calling McGregor and Associates. How may I help you today?" That voice was her mask. No one knew the woman on the line was pregnant and learning how to live again. At noon, she walked to the small park nearby, Gasworks Park. She sat on a bench, watching mothers push strollers, laughing. She pictured herself among them, pushing a stroller with 2 babies who looked like Ethan. Grey eyes, arched brows, that crooked smile. Her chest tightened. One afternoon, she heard a voice as she watched sparrows land on a bench. A laugh she knew instantly. She turned. Across the street, under the cafe awning, stood Ethan, black coat, paper bag in hand. Next to him, Marcus. They were talking, laughing easily. Ethan looked different, sharper, brighter, lighter. She froze. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her purse and hurried out of the park. But before reaching the parking lot, she couldn't help herself. She turned back. He was still there, saying something that made Marcus burst out laughing. Ethan smiled, that smile she used to love. A tear slid down her cheek, mingling with the falling rain. Back in her apartment, she collapsed onto the bed. Her hands trembled as she placed one over her belly. "Baby," she whispered, "your dad looks happy." Her voice broke. "But it's okay. We'll be fine. We'll be just fine." That night, she turned up the TV, the noise drowning the ache inside. But through the laughter and music, she heard 2 things clearly: the rain outside the window, and the sound of her own heartbeat, sinking with another tiny one deep within her. 2 heartbeats, one for her, one for the life or lives growing inside. And across the city, the man who once vowed to love her forever had no idea that 3 hearts were now beating for him in the rain of Seattle. That morning, Seattle was washed in the pale, silvery light that only spring could bring. No sun, rain, just a veil of mist clinging to the glass buildings. Rachel pulled on a thin sweater, buttoned it to her neck, and stepped out. The chill brushed against her cheeks, freeing her from the heaviness that had lingered for days. She was used to this rhythm now. The morning bus ride, 8 hours at the office, then home to her small apartment on Westlake Avenue, dinner alone, sleep alone. But today her head spun. She'd barely slept. The baby growing inside her made it hard to breathe, her stomach restless. Just make it to the end of the month, she told herself. Then I'll quit. The number 40 bus pulled onto the main road. Its brakes screeched. The doors hissed open. Rachel stepped in and sat by the window. Outside, the city went on. Indifferent people buying coffee, laughing, heading to work. No one knew that a woman holding the greatest secret of her life was among them. As the bus rumbled forward, she touched her belly and smiled faintly. "Good morning, my love." Then the dizziness came. Everything tilted, blurred, like someone had turned the world on its side. She blinked fast, gasping for air, but there was none. A woman beside her shouted, "Are you okay?" Rachel tried to answer, but her voice caught. Her body slumped. There were voices, brakes screeching, chaos, and everything went white. When she opened her eyes, she first saw the glare of fluorescent lights. A soft beeping echoed near her ear. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled her nose. It took a few seconds before she realized she was lying in a hospital bed. A middle-aged woman in a white coat approached, her expression stern but kind. "Welcome back, Miss Lewis." Rachel's throat was dry. "Where am I?" "St. Joseph's Hospital. You fainted on a bus. Someone called an ambulance in time." Rachel closed her eyes, exhaling. "Thank you." The doctor sat beside her, her tone steady and warm. "I'm Dr. Olivia Carter. I've looked over your scans. Did you know you're pregnant?" The air froze. Rachel blinked. "I'm what?" Dr. Carter gently took her wrist. "You're pregnant, Rachel, about 8 weeks along. And—" She paused, her eyes softening, then smiled. "You're carrying twins." The words shattered the room into silence. Rachel could hear only her heartbeat, pounding heavy and wild. "Twins?" "That's right." The doctor turned the ultrasound monitor toward her. 2 small flickers of light pulsed on the screen. 2 heartbeats, both very faint but fighting. Tears spilled before she could stop them. She stared at the glowing dots, tiny, fragile, alive. Her chest ached, breaking open with a mixture of pain, awe, and something more profound than she'd ever felt before. "How?" "I didn't even know," she whispered. Dr. Carter nodded, her voice gentle. "You've been overworked, malnourished, and sleep-deprived. You need rest, proper food, and calm. Otherwise, it could endanger all 3 of you." "3? You and your 2 babies." Rachel burst into tears. She had no strength left to hold them back. The doctor rested a hand on her shoulder. By evening, when Dr. Carter left, Rachel sat by the window. Outside, Seattle blurred under the rain, headlights smearing across wet streets. Inside, the only sound was the monitor's steady rhythm, 2 faint, persistent beats. She laid her hand on her stomach and smiled through tears. "Hello, my loves." Her voice trembled, soft as breath. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were there. I should have known sooner." A tear fell onto the white sheet. "Your father." She stopped and breathed. "He doesn't know. But that's okay. I'll take care of us." The 2 tiny pulses on the screen kept flickering 2 heartbeats, fragile yet strong enough to bring her back to life. She leaned back, eyes closing. Outside, the rain whispered against the window, and she could almost hear those 2 heartbeats blending a small, perfect song, the most beautiful sound she had ever known. The next morning, sunlight thin and rare in Seattle filtered through the blinds. Rachel woke feeling different. The dizziness was gone. The exhaustion had lifted. In its place was a quiet stillness, as if something inside her had settled into peace. Dr. Carter entered, holding a thick file. "We've given you fluids, iron, and vitamins. Your blood pressure's stable again." Her tone turned firm but kind. "But I'll be honest, this is a high-risk pregnancy. You're underweight, exhausted, and living alone. If you keep this pace, none of you will be safe." Rachel looked out the window, her lips pressed together. A rare light beam broke through the clouds, landing on the metal table beside her. "I don't have anyone," she said softly. "No one to help." "What about the father?" The question hit like a blade. She paused. "He doesn't know. Do you plan to tell him?" Rachel turned her face away. "No. He made his choice. I won't be the reason he looks back." Dr. Carter sighed. "All right. Whatever you decide, let us at least monitor you closely. The twins need you to be strong. Come in weekly, we'll keep watch together. Rachel nodded, whispering thanks. When the doctor left, she sat for a long while, palm resting over her belly. The two tiny hearts inside her beat steadily, trustingly. She murmured, "We'll be okay, won't we? I won't let anyone take you from me." That afternoon, she was cleared to leave. The air outside was cool and damp. She wrapped her scarf tightly, strolling down the long corridor. Each step seemed to echo in rhythm with the heartbeats inside her 3 drums, faint but resolute. The taxi passed familiar streets. The cafe where she and Ethan used to argue over pastries. The old bookstore where he once read her poetry. Everything still stood, except for them. The apartment was the same back home, cold, still, quiet. She took off her coat and turned on the light. The wilted plant on the windowsill waited, brittle and brown. She watered it gently. "Hang in there," she whispered. "We're trying too." Then she pulled open a drawer and took out her old leather journal from when she was still Rachel Lewis. On a new page, she wrote, "April 17th. I found out I'm carrying twins. 2 small hearts beating inside me. I'm scared, but for the first time, I feel alive. Maybe this isn't the road I chose, but maybe it's the one that chose me." She set the pen down. Tears fell, blurring the ink. "My loves," she whispered, smiling through it. "If you could hear me now, I'd tell you I'm not perfect, but I'll do everything I can to protect you." The days that followed became a quiet rebirth. Mornings. She worked from home, her voice calm on the phone. "Yes, I'll transfer you to Mr. Harmon. Thank you for calling." Afternoons, she went to the market, buying vegetables and fruit, just as the doctor advised. The shopkeepers began to know her. "You look tired," one woman said kindly. "Expecting, aren't you?" Rachel only smiled and nodded. The apartment began to change. She hung a miniature painting, bought a second-hand cradle, and the scent of Mrs. Hale's apple pie drifted up from downstairs every night. The plant on the windowsill turned green again. One night, as she was folding blankets, a gust of wind from the open window knocked a photo to the floor. She picked it up. It was their wedding picture, his smile bright, her head resting on his shoulder. She gazed at it for a long time, then placed it carefully in a box. "You don't need to know who your father was," she whispered. "As long as you know your mother loves you." By May, Seattle glowed differently. The rain lightened, sunlight brushed the bay. At her checkup, Rachel watched the ultrasound 2 shapes, now formed, one kicking, the other calm. Dr. Carter laughed. "Looks like they already have different personalities." Rachel smiled, the first genuine smile in a long time. "Have you chosen names?" "Not yet. I want to wait until I know their genders." "Then call them 2 heartbeats for now," the doctor said. Rachel nodded, eyes glistening. 2 heartbeats. Simple. But it was all her world needed now. That evening, she sat by the window and began a letter never meant to be sent. "Dear Ethan, you don't know, but some of you still live inside me. 2 parts, actually. I don't hate you anymore. I hope that someday, if you see 2 children with your gray eyes, you'll know that I forgave you. I don't need you to come back. I just need you to live well, so our children can one day be proud that their father once loved their mother deeply." She folded the letter and tucked it into the box with their wedding photo. Maybe she would show them someday when the twins were old enough. Outside, Seattle began to rain again. Rachel sat by the window, watching the drops slide down the glass, her hand resting over her belly. 2 small hearts beat in rhythm, 2 lives a gift, a reminder that sometimes, from the most painful endings, life still finds a way to begin. She whispered into the night, her voice blending with the rain. "Sleep well, my 2 heartbeats. Tomorrow, we'll live one more day together." And for the first time since signing those divorce papers, Rachel fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, dreamless and whole. Late August in Seattle was unusually still. No rain, no fog, just a chill in the air, whispering that autumn was near. Rachel sat at her desk under the warm yellow glow of her lamp. Her open journal lay before her. "August 29th. You're both 6 months old now. I can feel every little kick, like soft hellos inside me. The doctor says you're growing well, even though I haven't slept much. Everything's fine. Or at least, I want to believe it is." She set her pen down and rubbed her belly. The babies responded with a tiny kick. Rachel laughed softly. "All right, I know you're not sleeping yet." The apartment glowed in the soft light, the scent of Mrs. Hale's apple pie drifting up from downstairs. It was such a peaceful night that Rachel almost believed it could last forever, just her and her two little ones. But peace is the most fragile thing in this city. The first pain struck without warning, a sharp line of fire across her lower back. Rachel gasped, thinking it was only a muscle cramp. But then came another, harder, closer. "No, no, it's too soon," she whispered. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Her hands gripped the table. Sweat broke out across her forehead. Her breathing quickened. The third contraction hit like a wave breaking over her, forcing her to her knees. She crawled toward the phone on the table, but when she reached for it, it slipped from her grasp and rolled under the chair. Rachel bent down, stretching for it, but the pain blurred her vision. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "Please." "Not yet." Warm blood trickled down her legs. Panic clawed at her throat. She sobbed, dragging herself toward the door. "Help," she whispered. "Please." Her voice was barely audible. No one heard. She collapsed, blood spreading beneath her on the wooden floor. The ceiling lights swam, then dimmed, and the world went black. A dog barked somewhere in the hallway, sharp, frantic. Mrs. Hale, wrapped in her robe, opened her door. "What is it, Max? What's wrong out there?" The dog ran straight to Rachel's door, barking wildly. Mrs. Hale frowned and knocked. "Rachel, are you all right?" Silence. She pressed her ear to the door, only the hiss of wind through the cracks, and then, faintly, a sound, small and broken, like a sigh. Mrs. Hale's eyes widened. "Oh dear God." 10 minutes later, an ambulance siren split the night. Paramedics broke through the door. "She's losing a lot of blood." "Twins, 6 months, preterm labor," one shouted. "Pulse is weak, get oxygen on her." "We're losing her," the other yelled. Rachel heard voices but couldn't make sense of them. There was only light white, endless, and somewhere far away, a woman's gentle voice. "Stay with us, Rachel. Breathe. For them, keep breathing." She tried to speak, her lips barely moving. 2 heartbeats, and then everything faded. St. Joseph's Hospital glowed through the darkness once again. Dr. Olivia Carter was in the operating room 10 minutes after Rachel arrived. Blood everywhere, pressure dropping, nurses running. One shouted for the blood bank. "We need more AB negative," Dr. Carter commanded, her voice steady amid the chaos. A nurse shook her head. "We're out, doctor. Used it all on the highway crash victims." "Then check the donor registry, anyone on file." Now, the clatter of keys, the tension of time. No matches. Wait one. An old record, almost a year ago. Dr. Carter frowned. "Who?" "Ethan Lewis." Note says, "Ex-husband. Can we reach him?" "Unknown. But he's our only option. Call him. Now." The nurse dialed, her hands trembling. Inside the OR, Dr. Carter leaned over Rachel, blood staining her gloves. "Keep compressions steady. Don't let her go." The monitor screamed warnings. 2 faint heartbeats, 2 tiny lives fighting in the dark. Across the city, in the hum of the Harbor Light restaurant, Ethan was laughing with Marcus. A glass of red wine was in hand, jazz played low, and his life looked flawless. The company was weeks away from the public. The next deal was nearly sealed. The past was buried, he had made sure of that. His phone vibrated. Unknown number. He frowned. "Probably spam," he muttered, flipping it face down. Marcus grinned. "Tonight's yours, Ethan. Nothing can ruin it now." The phone buzzed again. Then again a third time. Marcus raised an eyebrow. 3 times. Might be serious. Ethan sighed, picked it up, and answered. "Hello?" A woman's voice, urgent, trembling. "Mr. Lewis? This is Ava Torres from St. Joseph's Hospital. Are you Ethan Lewis?" "Yes, I am. What's going on?" "We're treating a patient named Rachel Lewis. You're still listed as her emergency contact. She's in critical condition and needs an immediate transfusion. Her blood type is AB negative scarce. According to our records, you're the only available match." Ethan froze. The music around him dulled to silence. It took him a moment to breathe. Did you say? Rachel Lewis. Yes, sir. She's gone into premature labor, twins. Your blood is the only chance to save her and the babies. Can you come right away? A beat of silence. Ethan's pulse thundered in his temples. She's pregnant? He whispered. Yes, sir. Will you come? He clenched the phone. Send me the address. I'm on my way. The bar door burst open, the damp night wind rushing in. Ethan ran out, leaving Marcus stunned beneath the dim lights. Rain began to fall, slow and heavy, as though the sky had waited for this moment. He jumped into his car, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Streetlights blurred through the rain. Rachel, he murmured, barely breathing her name. She was pregnant, with twins, his twins. Images collided in his mind, the divorce papers, her wedding day smile, her tears in court, her final words. I hope you find what you're looking for. Each memory struck like a wave, suffocating. The car sped through slick streets. The wipers beat in a frantic rhythm, matching his heart. She's pregnant. They're mine. My children, he muttered, each word cutting deeper. He slammed the brakes at a red light, chest heaving. His hands trembled not from cold, but from fear. Ethan Lewis, the man who always knew what he wanted, had no idea what to do for the first time in his life. The light turned green. He pressed the gas, racing over the Fremont Bridge toward St. Joseph's. When he pulled into the ER bay, it was 11:42 p.m. He leapt out of the car, rain soaking his coat. Rachel Lewis, he barked at the nurse's station. I'm Ethan Lewis, where is she? The young nurse looked up, startled. You're the AB negative donor. Follow me quickly. He sprinted down the bright corridor, footsteps echoing against the tile. Through the small window of the hors door, he saw her, Rachel, pale as paper, eyes closed, her hair plastered to her forehead under the surgical light. He tried to push in, but a nurse stopped him. You can't go in. We need you for the transfusion. He sat, arm outstretched. The needle pierced his skin. Dark red flowed through the tube. You're the only one who can save them, the nurse said softly. Ethan nodded, staring at the blood, his blood rushing out of him toward her. Each drop carried guilt, memory, the weight of all his wrong choices. He closed his eyes. You wanted freedom, a voice whispered inside him. This is the price of it. The nurse removed the needle and pressed gauze to his arm when the second bag was empty. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. We'll transfuse it immediately. He stood, unsteady, and looked through the glass again. Dr. Carter was still working, signaling to the team. Two faint lines flickered on the monitor, still there, still fighting. Ethan pressed his palm to the window. Hold on, Rachel, he whispered. Please, hold on. An hour later, the doors opened. Dr. Carter stepped out, pulling down her mask. Her eyes were tired, but a faint light shone there. She's alive. 2 boys premature, but breathing. All 3 are weak, but out of danger. Ethan sank into the chair, covering his face with both hands. His breath broke, half relief, half remorse. Thank you, doctor, he murmured. Dr. Carter rested a hand on his shoulder. You can see the babies in the morning. They're small, prepare yourself. He nodded, tears spilling silently. Thank you, he whispered again. When she left, he remained there in the quiet hallway. The hospital walls glowed pale under the fluorescent light. Outside, rain whispered against the windows. Ethan pulled out his phone. Her name, Rachel, was still in his contacts. He had never deleted it. His thumb hovered over the screen, then stopped. He whispered, voice breaking, I didn't know. I wasn't there. But I won't leave again. I promise. Behind the heavy door, 2 fragile new lives breathed for the first time the soft rhythm of machines carrying their tiny heartbeats into the world. Ethan looked at the glowing sign, NICU, Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. The light washed over his face, wet with tears. My blood's in you now, Rachel, he murmured. Even if you hate me, I'll stay. As long as you breathe, as long as they breathe. I'm not going anywhere. Outside, the rain fell harder, but inside, in the heart of a man who once thought he'd lost everything, something stirred back to life, something he had long forgotten. Love. Dawn came slowly to Seattle that morning. The rain had stopped, leaving a sheen of dampness across the hospital windows. The first light slipped through the trees and reflected off the sterile white hallway where Ethan had sat all night, not moving from the chair outside the recovery room. He didn't remember when he had dozed off, only that when he opened his eyes, his neck ached, his jacket was crumpled, and the smell of antiseptic still clung to his hands. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Nurse Ava appeared, holding a clipboard. "Mr. Lewis," she said softly, smiling. "She's still unconscious, but her blood pressure is stable. The twin boys, they're in the NICU." "Doctor," Carter said, "you could see them if you'd like." Ethan stood abruptly, his chest tightening. "Boys," he repeated, as if afraid the words would vanish. "Yes," Ava said. "Are you ready?" He nodded faintly and followed her. The neonatal intensive care unit glowed with a strange white light, not too bright or dim, as though calibrated to cradle the fragile line between life and loss. Rows of incubators stretched across the room, each holding a being smaller than an adult's hand. The air hummed with the soft whir of ventilators and the rhythmic beeps of monitors, the heartbeat of the ward itself. Ava stopped at the far corner. "These are Noah and Eli." Ethan stepped closer. Inside the glass, two tiny boys lay side by side, their skin flushed pink, their chests rising and falling under the faint pulse of the machines. One was still, the other moved slightly, his foot nudging the blanket. Their heads were small, their hair thin as mist. Ethan froze. He knelt, resting his forehead against the glass. It was impossible to comprehend these were his sons. Two fragile lives born of a love he had once taken for granted, once thrown away. A tear fell, then another, then another. He tried to wipe them away, but his hands shook too much. "You can touch them, if you'd like," Ava whispered, gently. He hesitated, afraid his touch would break something sacred, but slowly he lifted the small hatch and reached inside. His trembling finger brushed the palm of Noah's hand. Instantly, the tiny fingers curled around his, tight, certain, as if the blood inside them knew its own. Ethan froze, a shock coursing through his body. He swallowed hard, and then the first sob broke free. He wept, the sound of a man who once believed tears were a weakness, now crying openly beside two incubators. "I'm sorry, Noah. I'm sorry, Eli. Your father wasn't there when you needed him." The small hand still clung to his finger, refusing to let go. Ava stepped back quietly, leaving him alone with his sons. Ethan bowed his head low. His blood now flowed through their veins. His blood had saved them. But the cruel truth was that he was also the reason they'd nearly died before taking their first breath. He saw it all again, the divorce papers, the glittering life he had once bragged about, Marcus's grin when he said, "Freedom makes you stronger." Now he understood. Freedom wasn't walking away. Freedom was staying and choosing love even when it demanded everything. He sat by their incubator the entire morning, afraid they might disappear if he blinked. When the nurse adjusted the tubes, he leaned down and pressed a trembling kiss to one tiny hand. "I'm here now," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." The morning light filtered through the window, casting a soft glow across his tired face. For the first time, his grey eyes held something real love. By afternoon, he was still there. A cold cup of coffee sat untouched beside him. Whenever he thought of drinking it, his gaze drifted back to the hallway leading to Rachel's room. He wasn't ready to see her. Not yet. He feared her anger and didn't know how to stand before the woman who had walked through hell alone, while he toasted his own success under a chandelier. Dr. Carter approached, her hands full of papers. "You should get some rest," she said gently. "No," Ethan murmured. "I'll stay. She's in a deep sleep. She won't wake until tomorrow. I'll wait." Dr. Carter studied him for a moment, then nodded. "As you wish. But eat something. You lost blood too. You're no good to them if you collapse." When she left, Ethan stared at the cold coffee. He thought of Rachel's voice, soft, teasing. "From another lifetime. We may not have much, Ethan, but if you're here, I won't feel poor." He had laughed then. "Love doesn't pay the rent," he had joked. And now she lay between life and death, while he sat here with nothing left but apologies too late to matter. A sound broke the silence. Ava again, her smile kind. "Would you like to see her? She's still unconscious, but They say people in comas can hear. He stood, his pulse hammered in his chest. The recovery room was still and pale. Only the quiet rhythm of the monitor and the scent of antiseptic filled the air. Rachel lay there, skin pale, lips dry, strands of hair clinging to her forehead. She looked smaller, frailer, but still the woman he had never honestly stopped loving. He sat beside her, his hand trembling as he took hers, cold but with a faint warmth at the fingertips. "Rachel," he whispered, afraid even the air might break her. "It's me. Ethan. Can you hear me?" No answer, just the soft beep of the machine. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead to her hand. "I'm sorry," he breathed, "for leaving, for letting you face everything alone. If I could trade everything, the company, the money, the name, I'd give it all just to be here sooner." His voice cracked. Tears fell, seeping into the white sheet. He took a shaky breath and continued, his words a vow. "I've seen them, Rachel. Noah and Eli. They look like you. They're breathing, fighting strong, just like their mother. My blood runs in them now. My blood. In you. And in our sons. I'll be here every day. No matter what you see when you open your eyes, no matter how you look at me, I won't leave." He looked at her face, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and kissed her gently. "Thank you for surviving." When he stepped out, the door closed softly behind him, leaving only the steady beat of the monitors inside. Outside, rain began again, soft, almost like breath. Ethan sat by the window, watching it streak down the glass. Beyond it lay Rachel, and upstairs, two tiny boys sleeping beneath the hum of machines. They were everything now, the only reason he still wanted to live. He smiled through the blur of tears, whispering, "Blood within blood. We were never really apart. Even if you forget me, Rachel, I'll find a way to show you love can begin again." The third morning after the emergency, Seattle's sky was still gray, but the rain had stopped. Faint sunlight slipped through the hospital window, glinting on the white bandages wrapped around Rachel's arm. She lay still, breathing evenly now. The monitor beside her blinked softly, her heartbeat learning how to live again. Ethan sat in the same chair, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He had barely left for 3 days, only stepping away to visit the twins before returning to her bedside. He talked to her endlessly about how Noah twitched his fingers and how Eli sneezed every time the nurse touched his cheek. He didn't know how much she could hear, but speaking kept him from falling apart. The door opened. Dr. Carter entered, checking the monitor. A faint smile crossed her tired face. "She's responding," she said. "Her vitals are stable. She could wake up any time now." Ethan shot to his feet. "Really? Really? But be gentle. She's weak, and she might not remember everything right away." Dr. Carter left, closing the door behind her. Ethan moved closer and took Rachel's hand. "Rachel, it's me, Ethan." Her fingers still, just a slight movement but real. He held his breath. "Can you hear me? It's me." Her eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Her light brown eyes, clouded with sedation, searched for focus. It took her a moment to recognize the blurred figure before her. When she did, her brow furrowed. "Ethan?" Her voice was raspy, fragile, barely a whisper. Ethan bent over her, tears springing to his eyes. "Yes, I'm here. I'm right here." She looked around, confused. "Where is this?" "St. Joseph's Hospital," he said softly. "You went into early labor. The baby's there upstairs." Her eyes widened slightly as fragments of memory returned. "Babies? Both of them?" "Yes," he said, squeezing her hand. "2 boys. Noah and Eli. They're alive. They're okay." A tear slid from the corner of her eye, falling onto the pillow. "I thought I was." "No," he said quickly. "You made it. You all did. You're the strongest person I've ever known." She looked at him longer now, clearer, and in her weak gaze flickered something raw. Pain. Her breathing deepened. She turned her face away. "Why are you here, Ethan?" He froze. "Because I know." Her voice cracked, trembling with anger for which she barely had strength. "You don't have the right to be here. You signed the papers. You left. You abandoned me." He said nothing. She struggled for breath, but her eyes stayed on him, unflinching. "Tell me, why are you here? Who told you to come?" A long silence. Then, quietly, he said, "The hospital called. They said you needed blood. No one else matched. I was the only one." She blinked. "Blood? I gave mine. To you, to the babies." He swallowed hard. "Rachel, my blood is in you now." She closed her eyes, another tear falling not from pain, but from the ache of being forced to face the man who had broken her heart. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you save me when you already chose to leave?" "Because I was a fool," Ethan said. "Because I thought walking away would make us both better. But that night, when the call came, I realized everything I ever wanted meant nothing if you were gone." She turned her face toward him. In her exhausted eyes were tears, anger, and something else, something more profound than either. A wound too deep to heal. "I was alone, Ethan. Every day, every night. I thought I'd die, and what scared me most wasn't dying. It was knowing you'd never know our children existed." He dropped his head to the edge of the bed, still holding her hand. His tears soaked into the sheet. "I know now," he whispered. "Too late, but I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just let me stay. Let me see you breathe, see them grow. I'm not leaving again." Rachel didn't answer. She turned toward the window, where the pale morning light filtered in weak, but real. That afternoon, a nurse came in pushing a wheelchair. "You can visit the babies for a few minutes," she said. Ethan moved to help, but Rachel shook her head. "I can manage. Let me." "You can come," she said quietly. "But don't touch me." He nodded, silent, and followed her. The NICU was just as before, white light, rhythmic beeps, the soft hum of machines. When the chair stopped in front of the incubator, Rachel's breath caught. The two tiny boys lay side by side, pink and fragile, wearing knit caps, their small chests rising steadily. She reached out a trembling hand to touch the glass. One of the babies stirred, his foot twitching. Rachel broke. She sobbed deep, shaking sobs that filled the sterile room. Ethan stood behind her, his throat burning, his chest tightening. He wanted to touch her shoulder, to say something, but he didn't. This moment was hers, the mother who had nearly died to bring these lives into the world. Rachel turned to him, eyes red. "You named them?" He shook his head. "No. I waited for you." She nodded faintly, looked back at the babies, and whispered, "Noah and Eli." Then she looked up at him again. "Because they have a father," she said softly. Even if he missed the beginning. Ethan's breath hitched. Tears slid down his face again. "I know," he said, "but I won't miss the rest." She said nothing. Her gaze returned to the twins, two tiny miracles breathing beneath the glass. Her lips trembled as she murmured, almost to herself, "Your blood is in me, and in them. Maybe some things can't be undone no matter how hard we try." Ethan knelt beside her wheelchair, his eyes level with hers. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "Just the chance to start again from here if you'll let me." Rachel studied him for a long time, weighing hurt against love, memory against the fragile present. Finally, she said softly, "I can't forgive you yet, Ethan, but I don't want to hate you anymore. Maybe we can learn to live again." For them, Ethan let out a shaky laugh, smiling through tears. "For Noah and Eli," he said. "For us the second time." She didn't answer. She only looked back through the glass, at the two small boys sleeping, their breaths thin as threads but strong enough to pull two broken souls back from the edge. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. Sunlight filtered through the hospital window, spreading across their faces, filling the room with something they had both forgotten existed, the quiet, steady light of hope. A week after Rachel woke up, the sun finally appeared over Seattle. Not much, just a few thin rays slipping through the gray clouds, glinting off the glass buildings around St. Joseph's Hospital. But to Ethan, it was the most beautiful light he'd ever seen. It felt like when Rachel first opened her eyes, fragile, slow, but real. Noah and Eli had been moved to the step-down nursery. The tubes were gone, replaced only by small monitors tracing their tiny, steady heartbeats. They were still red, small, and fragile but alive, breathing, and that alone was a miracle. A miracle Ethan knew he didn't deserve but stayed to witness anyway. He learned to mix formula, change diapers, and cradle them without fear of breaking something small. The first time he held Noah, his heartbeat thundered so loudly he could feel it against his ribs. The baby opened his eyes light brown, like Rachel's, and made a soft hiccup. Ethan smiled, his voice trembling. "Hey, little one, it's me, Dad." Noah squirmed, waving his tiny hands in the air. "I know," Ethan whispered. "I'm late, but I'm here now." Rachel sat on the bed, holding Eli, watching in silence. Every time Ethan came close, her body tensed slightly, a reflex of old wounds. But she no longer pushed him away. She watched him fumble with buttons, soothe crying fits, whisper nonsense to calm them. Sometimes, so briefly, it could be mistaken for a trick of the light, but a small smile touched her lips. That night, when the twins finally slept in their portable cribs, Rachel lay on her side, gazing through the hospital window. Outside, Ethan sat on a chair near the nursery, his head bowed, hand resting gently on the crib, as if afraid that letting go might make them disappear. Rachel spoke softly when Dr. Carter came to check on her. "He doesn't go home?" The doctor smiled. "He hasn't left the hospital since that night." Rachel said nothing. Her eyes lingered on him, on the man she once loved and lost, now sitting still, humbled, changed. Something inside her stirred, a flicker of tenderness, a trace of sorrow and fear. Fear of believing again. Fear that opening her heart would only mean watching him walk away again. When she was discharged, the sky was a dull silver, soft mist hanging low. Ethan carried Noah. Rachel held Eli. 2 car seats sat side by side in the back. As the car rolled out of the hospital gates, Rachel turned for one last look, the building where she had almost died, where her sons had drawn their first breaths, where a man had given his blood to save her. "Goodbye," she whispered, the word half gratitude, half release. Ethan glanced at her in the mirror. He wanted to speak but couldn't find words. So he said only, softly, "Let's go home." Rachel looked out the window. "Home?" He hesitated. "I still have the apartment in Queen Anne, the old place. If you'd like, you and the boys can stay there until you find somewhere new." Her gaze drifted to the rain-specked glass. "That apartment? We fought the most in that place." "I know," he said quietly, "but it's also where we had our best memories." The car moved on, rain beginning to tap gently on the windshield. The apartment in Queen Anne was unchanged: white walls, oak cabinets, and a wide window overlooking Lake Union. Clean, organized, and cold, just as it had been the day she left. Rachel set the carriers down beside the sofa. Noah slept soundly. Eli stirred, lips puckering in his sleep. Ethan stood behind her, watching a scene he had once dreamed of but never believed he'd see again. "You kept everything?" she asked quietly. "I couldn't throw anything away," he said. "If you ever came back, everything would still be here." She turned toward him, her eyes caught somewhere between tenderness and distance. "Ethan, you can't keep people by holding on to memories." "I know," he replied softly, "but they remind me of what I lost." That evening, the twins slept in the next room. Rachel sat in the living room under warm lamplight, a cup of tea in her hands. Ethan sat across from her. The silence between them was taut yet gentle, like a thin string waiting for one of them to pull. Without looking at him, she said, "Do you think just being here will make things right?" "No," he answered. "I just want a chance to make amends." "Amends?" She gave a quiet, joyless laugh. "Ethan, you can't fix something already broken with promises." He didn't argue. The words cut deep, but he took them quietly. He watched the steam rise from her cup, thin as the line between forgiveness and refusal. "Finally," he said, "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I need you to know I'm here. And I'll stay, whether you want me to or not." She set the cup down and looked at him for a long time. "You've said that before, and the next morning, you were gone." Ethan drew a shaky breath. "This time's different, because now I have 2 more reasons to stay." She didn't answer, but the words made her eyes glisten. She turned away quickly, but tears slipped down her cheeks. Ethan said nothing. He rose quietly and went to the twins' room. The soft nightlight cast a glow over their tiny faces. He placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heart beat. 3 rhythms now. His, Noah's, Eli's. No longer alone. He whispered, "I hurt your mother, but I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. I promise." Behind him, Rachel stood silently in the doorway. She didn't speak. She only watched the man bent low beside the cribs, the warm light pooling around his shoulders. For the first time since that terrible night, something inside her eased, not forgiveness, not yet, but a loosening of the weight she'd carried alone. Outside, Seattle glowed with a soft amber light. Not bright, not dazzling, but true. And sometimes, that kind of fragile light is the beginning of a long, quiet dawn. Late October in Seattle. The city was deep in its wind season. The trees lining Queen Anne Avenue had begun to shed their leaves. A rare sunlight slipped through the mist each morning, casting gold over the 8th-floor apartment where Rachel, Ethan, and their 2 sons now lived. Noah had grown heavier, his skin flushed pink, and he laughed whenever he heard the guitar melodies on his father's phone. Eli was calmer, he cried less, and watched more, his wide, light brown eyes often fixed on his mother's face. The apartment, once silent, now pulsed with life. The soft breathing of babies, the quiet laughter, the murmurs exchanged between sleepless parents. Rachel had started working again part-time, writing content for a design firm downtown. She worked by the window, pausing often to watch the twins playing on a blanket, fists in their mouths, eyes tracking Ethan as he mixed formula. It was an ordinary rhythm, gentle, steady, peaceful. But peace, she had learned, didn't always mean calm. That evening, while Rachel was nursing Eli, Ethan's phone rang. The screen lit up. Marcus Paulson. Ethan stared for a few seconds, then silenced it. But a minute later, it rang again. He glanced toward Rachel. She was focused on Eli, not looking up. He stepped out onto the balcony. The wind scraped against the metal railing. The smell of rain clung to the air. Marcus. At last came the dry, calm voice of someone who had once known him too well. "We need to talk. Not now. It's not about work, Ethan. It's about you. And, Rachel." Ethan's grip tightened. "Leave her out of this." Marcus gave a thin laugh. "I don't have to. You did that yourself the moment you gave her your blood. You think people haven't noticed?" Silence. Marcus went on. "Nova Edge shares, the Vegas project, the June investors, your signature is on every deal, and you walked away. The board is meeting. If you don't come back, you lose everything. Tell them I don't care. Don't be an idiot. You built this empire. Don't throw it away for a woman." Ethan closed his eyes. In his head, he could still hear the faint beeping of heart monitors, Rachel's labored breathing in the hospital. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but sure. "She's not a woman. She's my family." A pause. Then Marcus's tone softened into mockery. "Family? Do you remember what you told me before your divorce? Family slows you down. Those were your words, Ethan. You forget fast." Ethan flinched. That was a lifetime ago. Maybe. But the world hasn't forgotten, especially the press. I kept them quiet, but they're digging again. Someone knows about the twins, and they know you're the father. If that breaks, Nova Edge burns. Rain struck the metal awning above. "If I have to choose between Nova Edge and them," Ethan said slowly, "I choose them." Marcus gave a short, bitter laugh. "You sound like a man about to lose everything." "Maybe," Ethan replied, "but this time, I know what's worth keeping." He ended the call and exhaled hard, leaning against the railing. Before him, Seattle shimmered in the mist, its lights blurred like opportunities dissolving under the rain. When he returned inside, Rachel was placing the twins in their crib. She looked up. "Marcus?" "Yes." "Work?" He nodded. "Trouble?" He hesitated. "Nothing serious." She studied him, her eyes deep and steady. "Ethan, I used to believe I'm just busy, meant something harmless. But now I want the truth. If there's something you're hiding, say it. I'm strong enough to hear it." He fell silent. Between them, the air thickened. Only Eli's soft breathing filled the space. "I just need time," he said at last. "I'll handle it." Rachel nodded faintly and turned away. But in her eyes, the old fear had returned, the fear that had once driven her to leave. That night, when everyone slept, Rachel sat by the window. She opened her small notebook and wrote, November 2nd. Everything is calm, but my heart is not. Something in his eyes, in the silence between us, scares me. I'm afraid history is repeating itself. She closed the notebook and looked down at the twins sleeping beside her, two small lives, two heartbeats that had once pulled her back from the edge. She whispered, I won't let anyone hurt you, not even your father, if he forgets his promise again. Outside, the wind whistled through the window frame, carrying the scent of rain and the far-off echo of waves breaking against the harbor. Seattle, the city of beginnings and endings. And tonight, it seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if love was strong enough to survive its own past. 2 days later, rain again, thin, silvery thread sliding down the glass. Rachel stirred a pot of chicken soup, its aroma warming the room. Noah lay in his crib. Eli napped on the couch, one tiny hand twitching in sleep. The door opened. Ethan stepped in, soaked to the bone, pale and tired. Forgot your umbrella? She asked. He nodded. I met Marcus. She set the spoon down. Marcus? He came to the old office. Wanted to talk. Her voice steadied. About what? Ethan peeled off his wet coat, hanging it on the rack. Water dripped to the floor, the sound mingling with rain outside. He said, The board will sell my shares if I don't return to the company. I'll lose everything, and I told him I'm staying here. Rachel tilted her head. You mean that? I do. His grey eyes met hers. I'm done being that man. She studied him briefly, then said softly, I hope so. Later that night, after the twins had fallen asleep, a knock echoed at the door. Ethan checked the clock, almost 10 p.m., and opened it. Marcus stood there, drenched, in a black coat, his expression cold and disdainful. You wouldn't answer my calls, he said. So, I came. Ethan's jaw tightened. Leave. I already told you. Marcus glanced past him, spotting Rachel with Noah in her arms. A smirk curved his lips. So this is it. The perfect little family of Ethan Lewis. Rachel met his gaze, calm but sharp. Mr. Paulson, I think your discussion belongs outside. Marcus chuckled, strong as ever. But do you know why he left you back then? The room froze. Ethan stepped forward. Enough, Marcus. Oh no, Marcus said, voice hardening. She deserves to hear it. He didn't just leave you for work. He signed the Vegas project last year under my name to avoid litigation, and when the scandal hit, he vanished, left me to take the fall. That's who your Ethan is. Rachel's eyes were fixed on Ethan. They were no longer soft. Is that true? He hesitated a beat, then two. Partly, he said quietly. Which part? I let Marcus sign for me to save the company, but I never blamed him publicly. Marcus barked a laugh. Didn't blame me? You let the media destroy me. I lost everything while you hid behind your shiny empire. And now you play the doting father. Bravo. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing Marcus by the collar. I was wrong, and I've paid for it. But don't drag her into this. Marcus pried his hand off, smirking. Think about it, Rachel. A man who betrays his wife and best friend, who will he betray next? Men like him don't change. He turned toward the door. The board will strip you clean soon, Ethan. Then we'll see what's left of you besides regret. The door slammed shut. Silence filled the apartment. Ethan turned, but Rachel had already laid Noah down and said quietly, You should rest. It's late. Rachel, please. I don't want excuses, she said, her tone low but firm. I'm tired, Ethan. Tired of believing. Every time I let myself trust, your past comes knocking. He stepped closer. I told you, I'm not that man anymore. But your past is you, she whispered. You can't say, I've changed, and expect it all to disappear. She turned away, rocking Eli gently, her voice trembling. You say you want a new beginning, but you've never told me everything. I'm not afraid of you losing money or power. I'm afraid you'll lie again. Ethan stood behind her, his voice rough, stripped bare. I haven't lied. I made mistakes, terrible ones in business, in love, but I want to fix them. Not with words, with time. Rachel stood still for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, without looking back, "Time will tell, Ethan. But until then, I need distance." He froze. "Distance? I'll stay with Mrs. Hale for a few weeks. To think, not because I hate you, but because I need to breathe." He wanted to argue, to reach out, but her eyes were resolute. It wasn't anger now, but the quiet ache of someone who must save herself before she can love again. She lifted the twins into their stroller. Ethan watched, eyes stinging. The door closed behind her, the last sound swallowed by rain hitting the balcony rail. He sank to the floor, head in his hands. He could almost hear his son's soft breaths through the storm's noise, the echo of what he was losing again. Outside, Rachel pushed the stroller down the hallway. Each step was slow, but certain. She didn't know what the future would bring. Only that to love again, she had to learn to stand on her own first. And beneath the cold breath of Seattle's wind, two people still bound by love stood on opposite sides of their mistakes in that rain-soaked night. The night would pass, dawn would come, but sometimes one must walk through the longest dark to reach the light. Port Townsend is a small town by the Puget Sound, about 2 hours from Seattle. Autumn lingered longer here. The wind was gentle, the sky open, and old wooden houses dotted the road that hugged the sea, where fog often crawled up to the porch. Rachel had moved into Mrs. Hale's cottage, the elderly neighbor who'd once helped her through the early days after her divorce. The house sat on a hillside overlooking the water. From her bedroom window, she could see waves breaking against the rocky shore, and every morning, the cries of seagulls became a kind of comfort. The twins loved it here. Noah laughed every time the wind rustled through the pine trees. Eli slept more soundly, no longer startled awake by the endless Seattle rain. Life in Port Townsend moved more slowly, as if even time here had learned to soften. Rachel brewed coffee each morning, opened the window to let the light in, and wrote small, quiet blog entries about motherhood. They were simple, just honest notes about first diapers, first fevers, the impossible task of soothing 2 crying babies at once. But her gentle and real words began to spread online, a soft breeze that reached mothers she had never met. One morning, as Mrs. Hale clipped lavender on the porch, she said, "You know, dear, sometimes God breaks us in half just to plant us in the right soil." Rachel smiled faintly. "I used to think I'd never stand again. But you're standing now, Mrs. Hale said, eyes drifting toward the sun as it scattered light across the sea. Back in Seattle, Ethan woke each morning in silence. No children's breath, no Rachel humming softly in the kitchen, only the hiss of the coffee machine and emptiness. He started over, truly over. He sold most of his shares in Nova Edge, not out of anger, but out of release. The company had once been his dream. Now it was only a mirror, reflecting a man he no longer wanted to be. He called Marcus not to fight, but to apologize. "Marcus," he said, steady and calm, "I know I cost you more than money. If you want, take what's left of my shares." Marcus laughed dryly. "You think you can buy forgiveness?" "No," Ethan replied. "I just don't want to hold on to something that cost me everyone I love." There was a long silence. Then Marcus said quietly, "Maybe I pushed you too far too. I hope you figure out what to do with the rest of your life." "I finally do," Ethan said, and hung up. He began freelancing consulting for small startups. Less money, more peace. On weekends, he drove to Port Townsend. He never went to Rachel's house, he'd promised her space, but he always stopped at a little cafe on the hill above the harbor, where he could see the roof of Mrs. Hale's cottage from afar. He would sit with a cup of latte, watch her window light up at dusk, then quietly drive home. One morning at the market, Mrs. Hale saw him. Whether by chance or design, he couldn't tell. She recognized him immediately, despite the hat and coat. "You're Ethan, aren't you?" He froze. "Yes." "Hello, Mrs. Hale. You've been coming here a lot, yet you never knock on the door." He smiled awkwardly. "She's not ready." "And you?" He didn't answer. Mrs. Hale looked at him for a long moment. Her voice was soft but cut deep. "Sometimes it's not the other person we're waiting for, it's ourselves, to be humble enough to walk back." Ethan nodded. "I'm afraid of hurting her again." "You only hurt people when you're still the same," she said. "If you've truly changed, you'll know how to walk gently." She left him standing there, the wind off the sea, cold and clean. Ethan turned toward the small house, its windows glowing gold against the grey sky. Rachel inside, rocking their sons to sleep. He whispered to himself, "Don't rush. Let love return the way dawn enters a room, slow but certain." Be December for blanketed Port Townsend. Rachel sat at the wooden table with a cup of tea, watching her sons crawl across the rug. She felt calmer now. She no longer hated Ethan, only carried a quiet scar, tender but no longer painful. That morning, she opened her laptop to write. A new email appeared. From Ethan Lewis. Subject: "Something small I'd like to send you." She hesitated, then clicked. "I know you don't want more apologies, so this isn't one. I'm sending a plan not for a business, but for the future of Noah and Eli. I've set up an education fund in your name and their name. The account isn't under me, it's for them when they turn 18. I'm not trying to buy redemption, only responsibility. And if you'll allow it, I want to visit them on Christmas. No gifts, no promises. Just me, Ethan." Rachel read it twice. She didn't reply right away. But that night, when Mrs. Hale asked, she nodded. Maybe. It's time they saw their father. That Christmas, snow fell softly. Ethan drove to Port Townsend, carrying a small tree and 2 pairs of knitted socks. Rachel was wrapped in a grey scarf on the porch, her hair tousled by the wind. She opened the door. Her eyes were calm, not angry, not bitter, just a quiet acceptance shaped by time. "You're on time," she said. "I was afraid you'd change your mind if I were late." "I wouldn't." He smiled faintly and stepped inside. The twins were on a blanket, cooing. Noah laughed out loud when he knelt, and Eli stared at him with Rachel's exact eyes. He reached out, hesitating. Then those tiny fingers wrapped around his own and something inside him broke open, raw and full. "Hi, little ones," he whispered. "I'm your dad." Rachel watched, silent. Ethan bent down and kissed their foreheads, his shoulders trembling. She walked over and handed him a cup of hot tea. "You've lost weight," she said softly. "I quit smoking. Cut back on coffee." "Why?" "I don't want them growing up knowing the smell of smoke on their father's clothes." She smiled faintly. "Good. I hated that smell." "I know." They sat quietly, the sound of wind and baby laughter between them. After a while, she asked, "Do you regret it? Losing everything to keep this?" Ethan looked at her. "No, because now I understand the hardest thing I ever lost was time I didn't spend with you." She didn't answer. She just looked at him long, steady, warm like the first light breaking through months of grey. That night, snow blanketed the roof. Ethan stayed to help Mrs. Hale hang lights around the porch. Rachel put the twins to bed, then came out with 2 cups of cocoa. They stood side by side, watching the town below, golden lights glowing softly through the snow. "Does Seattle have snow?" she asked. "A little. Not like this." "Will you go back?" "Not if you'll let me stay here." Rachel turned to him, her voice almost a whisper. "Not if. When?" He looked up, surprised. "What did you say?" "When I'm ready," she said quietly. "You can stay." Ethan smiled, a genuine smile this time. The wind was cold, but their hearts were warm. Inside, Noah stirred. Eli smiled in his sleep. And on that porch, the Christmas lights glowed over 2 people who had once lost each other, now standing together again, not because they'd forgotten the past, but because they'd finally learned how to walk through it. The next morning, the sky was a rare, clear blue. Sunlight poured through the window, washing over the bed where the 4 lay together. Ethan woke first, watching Rachel and the twins sleep beside him. He whispered, barely audible, "This time, I won't let the dawn pass without them." February. Seattle had turned cold again. Snow melted slowly. Droplets slid from the eaves onto the street, glittering under the streetlights like seconds falling through open hands. Ethan returned to the city not to stay, but to close a chapter. Nova Edge, the company he had founded, was holding a press conference to announce his departure officially. Since Marcus had taken over, the press had begun circling again, especially after word spread that he had twin sons. Rachel disliked it. She feared lights, cameras, and headlines that might reopen what she had fought to forget. But Ethan knew that silence would only let others twist the truth. And this time, he wouldn't let anyone speak for him. The press conference was on the 24th floor of the old building, the one that had seen most of his youth. Marcus greeted him with a short, quiet handshake. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure. They'll ask tough questions. Let them." When Ethan stepped out, flashes exploded around the room. Dozens of reporters turned their cameras and microphones toward him. The man once hailed as a symbol of success, now standing in a plain grey shirt, no tie, no entourage. A journalist called out, "Mr. Lewis, rumors say you left the company because of a personal scandal. Any comment?" Ethan drew a steady breath. "It's not a scandal. It's the consequence of bad choices." Another voice cut in, "People claim you abandoned your wife while she was pregnant, and that you're back now just to fix your image. Is that true?" The sound of shutters flickered like rain. Ethan was silent for a few seconds, then met the lens head-on. "It's true. I walked away from the woman I should have held on to. I left her alone through the hardest days of her life, and that will always be my greatest mistake. But I didn't come back to save a reputation. I came back because I learned that success means nothing if the person you love isn't there to share it." The room went still. A female reporter, voice softer, asked, "And the children? Can you tell us about them?" Ethan smiled an unguarded, honest smile. "They're my miracle. Every morning I hear their laughter. I know I've been forgiven, maybe not in words, but in the simple fact that they exist." Somewhere, a whisper passed. He's not reading from notes. He's speaking from truth. The conference ended quietly, not the media frenzy people had expected. As Ethan stepped out, Marcus was waiting by the elevator. "You did well." "No," Ethan said. "I just told the truth. Sometimes, that's the hardest thing." Marcus extended his hand. "Keep in touch." "Not for business, for friendship." Ethan clasped it. "Thank you, Marcus." That evening, Rachel sat at her table watching the broadcast replay. The twins were asleep. The porch light cast their shadow across the wall. On the screen, Ethan spoke slowly, voice rough, stripped of excuses or defenses, only honesty. And that was what made her cry. Not from pain, but because she finally saw him as he was, not the man who ran, not the ghost of a dream, but someone honest. She turned off the TV, picked up her phone, and wrote, "I saw it. For the first time, I believe you." Ethan read the message alone in his hotel room. He didn't reply, just placed the phone against his chest and smiled faintly. Outside, the snow had stopped. Droplets clung to the glass, shimmering under the city lights, as if Seattle itself was learning how to forgive. 3 months later, May. Port Townsend was warm, its spring scented with lavender and salt from the sea. Ethan had moved there permanently. He rented a small house on the hillside, a few streets from Rachel's, close enough to see, far enough to respect her space. He left a basket of apples or wildflowers each morning on her porch. No note, but she always knew. Rachel had never said, "I forgive you," but she no longer avoided him. They took walks with the twins, bought diapers together, laughed when Noah tried to stand and fell into his father's arms. Everything became easy again, as if love didn't need to be declared, only lived, a little more each day. On her porch, Mrs. Hale watched them under the setting sun and murmured to the wind, "Lord, they finally learned what you meant, that forgiveness doesn't weaken us. It makes us strong enough to love again." One morning in June, Rachel received a letter from Seattle from a magazine, an invitation to be featured in Women of Strength. She read it, then set it aside. Ethan asked, "Will you say yes?" "No, I don't want fame. I want peace to raise my kids and keep writing my story." He smiled. "That's exactly why they want to write about you." She met his gaze. "You're not afraid of what people say anymore." "No, not as long as you look at me like this." "Like what?" "Like I still have a chance." Rachel smiled, her first genuine smile in years. "You do, but you'll have to keep it." Summer came. Rachel's little house brimmed with sunlight. The twins crawled everywhere. Ethan fixed fences, painted the porch, and sometimes just sat quietly watching her laugh in the light, the thing he'd once lost, now found again. One evening, they walked together on the beach, each holding a child. The wind carried salt, the waves steady against the sand, the horizon painted gold. "Did you know," Rachel said softly, The day I woke up in the hospital, I thought I'd died. But someone told me, we share the same blood. I didn't understand then. Now I do. Ethan looked at her. It wasn't blood that saved you, Rachel. It was love. She turned to him, and in his eyes she saw everything, every mistake, every fall, and every quiet effort to make it right. She stepped closer and kissed him, briefly but enough to say everything. I've forgiven you. We survived. Now, let's live. That night, Rachel stepped onto the porch when the twins were asleep. The small lamp Ethan had brought from Seattle sat on the table, the only thing he'd kept from their old apartment. She switched it on. The soft golden light spilled across the wood, into the half-open doorway. Ethan came out and draped a blanket over her shoulders. It's cold. No, she whispered. It's warm now. She leaned into him. Do you think we would have ever found each other again if it hadn't been for that storm? Sometimes God sends the storm so that we find the right shelter. They fell silent. The sea shimmered in the distance, the sky full of stars. Inside, the twins breathed softly, two small hearts beating as one. Ethan took her hand. Rachel. I love you. This time, without conditions, without but, without if. She smiled, eyes glistening. This time, I believe you. The next morning, dawn broke. Light poured through the window, spilling over the two cribs. Eli stirred. Noah smiled in his sleep. Outside, Ethan brewed coffee while Rachel sliced bread. Sunshine wove gold through her hair. They didn't say a word, just simple things, but to them, that simplicity was a miracle. Once again, they had lost everything, only to rediscover the one thing that remained after the storm, a love true enough to forgive and strong enough to begin again.